Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 9 of an exciting new series. What if Genius Deku challenged the world without a quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by JayDeeKay on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. When Midoriya exited the tunnel, many of the teachers reacted in the same way. Present Mike and Ectoplasm stare in shock and some confusion. Aizawa had risen from his chair, taking a single step forward, an action mirrored by All Might. Namiri had moved to the teacher's booth after being replaced, but once Midoriya emerged, unarmored, Namiri ran to the front of the booth, as if drawing closer might change the reality in front of her. Majima was gripping the table near him, blood running cold as he watched Midoriya take the arena. However, none of the teachers reacted quite like Ken did. While being the slowest to react, not moving until Midoriya's foot lifted from the sand and met the cement, Ken's reaction was by far the most visceral. He shot up from his chair, looking horrified, and bolted over to Nizu, who, like always, showed no emotion about the scene. Gripping the arm of Nizu's seat, Ken leans over Nizu, pupils like pin pricks, and jaw set like a slab of stone in his mouth. Nizu can begin, sweat beading on his forehead. Stop this fight. Now! I am afraid that isn't possible, Nizu says, still visible unfazed by Ken's burst of emotion. Ken does not take this kindly, slamming his fist into the table next to Nizu, knocking over his tea set. Damn it, Nitsu! Ken shouts, just listen to me. You need to stop this fight. It can't happen. Still, Nizu refuses to acknowledge Ken, so he grows desperate, much to Majima's confusion. Please, Nizu. Midoriya isn't supposed to be fighting. Not without the armor. Oh, is that so? Nizu raises an eyebrow at Ken. And why, perchance, would you think that? Ken stiffens up, but Nizu presses on. Honestly, if I didn't know any better, I would say you are less shocked about Midoriya's lack of armament, and more about Midoriya arriving at the field at all. Ken's jaw flaps open as he tries to concoct a statement, but Nizu interrupts him. But of course, I would have no proof to corroborate such claims, and even if I did, it wouldn't be right of me to misplace my trust in our staff, wouldn't it, Ken? Ken says nothing, but his body speaks volumes. His shoulders are shaking, chest slumped, and legs bent. He looks like a man desperate to be heard, but unwilling to speak, trapped forever in a limbo of inaction. In the end, he is unable to speak. As soon as the match opens, Bakugo leaps into the air, propelling himself towards the quirkless boy with an explosion-powered lunge. Midoriya sees this attack and rolls forward, letting Bakugo fly over him. However, during the lunge, Bakugo angles himself so that one palm is down, and as Midoriya rolled, he clipped the quirkless boy in the back, causing him to grunt in pain. Landing swiftly, Bakugo turns around, only to be met with a glowing palm aimed at his head. He barely has a second to move his head to the side before a blast of energy shoots out, bolting through where his head used to be. Bakugo growls at the glowing palm, seeing the copper wires running down Izuku's arm crackle with a soft blue energy. Remember this one, Bakugo? Izuku growls out through grit teeth. I do. I remember launching you back with this same gadget almost a year ago. Bakugo bares his teeth at the boy in front of him. You think it matters whatever pathetic little gizmo you whip out. No matter what you do, or what you bring, you will never be able to make a dent in me. Bakugo launches himself forward at Izuku, a similar lunge to before, but instead of dodging, Izuku allows Bakugo to draw close. When Bakugo whirls his right arm around to hit Izuku, Izuku quickly ducks under the sweep, letting the explosion go off right above him. Putting his palm up, right under Bakugo's chin, Izuku releases a blast of energy, sending it into Bakugo's chin and causing him to flip around and slam his back into the ground. Bakugo hit the ground hard, causing his breath to briefly escape his lungs. However, the pain of the blow faded quickly, but the shock of the attack is what kept Bakugo on the ground, lost in his own head. What the hell just happened? Bakugo thought. How did he do that? You know, Bakugo, you are far more predictable than you think you are. Izuku opened, drawing the wrench from his back, brandishing it like a club. For instance, you always lead with a right hook. Izuku swings the wrench in an arc, down towards Bakugo and striking him in the chest. Bakugo snaps out of his shock just in time, using an explosion to launch himself to the side, letting the wrench impact the cement where he once lay. Bakugo rolls and lands in a squat, palms forward. He stands, still crouching low, like a tiger ready to pounce. But instead of reeling back like he is used to, Izuku seems to crouch low as well, mirroring his movements. Abused and abuser circle each other, neither making the next move, both anticipating the first strike. Eventually, Midoriya smirks, much to Bakugo's ire. "What's the matter, Bakugo?" Izuku jabs. "I thought you said I couldn't touch you. Yet here you are hesitating." Izuku's smirk breaks into a dark smile. "If I didn't know any better, I would almost think you are scared." That caused Bakugo to rage, launching himself forward and breaking the standoff. He puts both hands out, readying a stun grenade, to which Izuku raises the welding goggles from around his neck and puts them over his eyes. When the flashbang rings out from Bakugo's palms, Izuku is unaffected due to the heavy lenses and brings his wrench forward again, hitting Bakugo in the stomach. Bakugo lurches to the side, stumbling at the blow and coughing loudly. As Bakugo collects himself, his rage begins to boil, and he launches forward again. However, Izuku reaches down to his belt, grabbing the gun-like object from his waist and pointing it at Bakugo. He pulls the trigger, and a long cord launches out of the gun, tipped with a three-pronged hook. Bakugo dodges the grapple and closes in, releasing an explosion that hits Izuku in the chest, causing him to stumble and fall. Bakugo looms over Izuku, a sadistic smile on his face, but he notes a lack of fear in Izuku's face and hears the sound of something being reeled in. Before he can think, he feels something grip the cloth of his pant leg and pull with immense strength, causing him to, once again, fall over. Looking up, he sees Izuku standing, grapple gun in hand, and his teeth bared at the explosive boy. "That was for Hatsum. Hatsum, please focus." Izuku snapped at Mei as she fed the wires down from his shoulder to his wrist, towards the repulsor fitted onto his metal palm. Mei had been zoning out, staring at the reactor fitted into Izuku's shoulder cap, but flinched at his tone, causing her to stare down at the floor. Izuku sees this reaction, and his features soften. "I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. We just don't have a lot of time, so we can't get distracted." Mei nods, seeming to accept the apology, but keeps her eyes away from the reactor. Guilt swims in Izuku's chest, knowing that he had been too aggressive with his admonishment, and tries to think up a solution. He looks around the room, and his eyes lock onto the pile of scrap that was once his suit. "So, you made some gadgets too, right?" Izuku opened. "Can you tell me about them?" Immediately, he notices a shift in Mei's temperament, as she seems to get far more animated in her work. "Yes, I made 4 different babies to show off for investors. I made 2-leg harnesses that were capable of hovering. Ooh, and the jetpack. The jetpack was my favorite baby. I also made a grappling hook to assist in maneuvering while hovering, and an apparatus for the upper body to keep someone upright during heavy movement." "That's impressive," Izuku praises, causing Mei to smile. "How did the jetpack work?" Using compression fans fitted into the sides of the pack, they pressurized air that was stored in a tank around the sides. Then, when active, the air would release from the jets of the pack, creating a burst of upward motion. Mei connected the wire to the lens and began to feed the third wire around. "I could not make it capable of sustained flight, so I added hover boots to allow me to float down slowly." Izuku puts a hand to his chin. "The design for that jetpack sounds familiar. Did you base it off of Airjet?" He sees Mei shoot up to his face, her expression more animated than he had seen in hours. "Yes, that is exactly right. I saw their pack on TV when my parents wanted me to watch something with them, and wanted to recreate the design." Izuku seems to shrink away from her energy, trying to move his face away from hers, but she only seems to move closer to him every time he adjusts. "I just took a guess. I saw the design once on my dad's table, and dash." "What do you mean?" Izuku blinks and sees Hatsum staring in confusion. What? Oh, my dad worked on Airjet's jetpack. He built the third iteration of the modulator for turbine frequency. Hatsum seemed to stall, but then her eyes lit up, and she rushed forward. Really? Your dad builds support gear? What is his name? Who does he work for? Does he have connections? Can I meet him? Izuku eventually pushes Hatsum off of him, but her energy seems to be only growing. See, can we just focus on the task at hand? He turned away from Hatsum, but one of her questions stung him a bit. Besides, my dad is dead. Hatsum stills, and the pair enter an extended silence, only broken by the soft sounds of duct tape and metal. That is not good. May spoke. Izuku shook his head. No, it isn't. He tried to ignore the ache in his chest and steer the question back to the original topic. Hey, do you happen to have any of these gadgets still? May seemed to ponder for a moment. I am not sure, most of them were destroyed when she shuddered, seeming to close in on herself. But Izuku reached his metal hand down, putting it on her shoulder, trying to stabilize her. After a few moments, May breathes deeply and continues. The only baby I know that survived was baby number 47, the grappling hook. Izuku thought for a moment, and eventually leaned down to Hatsum, who was fitting the last wire into place on his wrist. Do you think I could see it? I want to try something with it. Bakugo yanked the hook off of his leg, allowing it to reel back in. Izuku lowered the grapple, but kept his hand on the trigger. Bakugo quickly rose to his feet, beginning to circle Izuku, his thoughts swimming. What the fuck is going on? Bakugo thinks, this is shitty fucking Deku. Why is he fighting back? Bakugo narrowed his eyes. Looks like I need to really show this defect his place now. Bakugo launched himself into the air, Izuku readying himself for the impact. But when Izuku moved to dodge his attack, Bakugo used a well-placed explosion with his other hand to sweep around Izuku, surprising the quirkless boy. Bakugo then impacted his side, causing Izuku to gasp out in pain. Izuku tried to right himself, but Bakugo capitalized on Izuku's imbalance, slamming his fist into Izuku's cheek and following it up with an explosion-fueled punch to the stomach. Izuku cried out in pain as the explosion impacted his stomach, throwing him to the ground. Bakugo launched himself forward, and Izuku tried to right himself, pointing his repulsor at Bakugo, who dodged it and impacted Izuku again, throwing him violently to the side. Izuku struggled to rise, but Bakugo unleashed another explosion onto his back, causing him to fall flat on the ground. Bakugo pressed a knee to Izuku's back, holding him down, and Izuku knew he had to think fast. As Bakugo pulled his fist back, ready to rocket it into the back of Izuku's head, Izuku knew he had to think fast. When I was building the arm, I had to install a splint in the back of the wrist to restrict the motion of the wrist to a natural range. But if I put pressure here, Izuku reached over to his metal hand, grabbing the wrist and clenching, allowing the splint in the back of the wrist to fall loose. Hearing the telltale clinking of metal falling loose into the space within the arm, Izuku's hand spun 180 degrees around, his palm glowing and firing off, shooting into Bakugo's face, causing him to cry out in pain. Izuku felt his wrist lock up and swore, lifting himself and throwing Bakugo off of him. Izuku stood, grabbing his wrist and trying to rewrite the motion of the hand, but found that due to the strain that motion had put on the bearing, the entire wrist mechanism had locked up. He looked over and saw the referee looking at his wrist in confusion. Bakugo, as well, seemed shocked by the state of his right wrist. However, he only hesitated for a moment, launching himself forward. Izuku dove to the side, still getting clipped by the large explosion produced by Bakugo, and grabs his wrench off the ground. Bakugo launches forward, ready to strike Izuku in the chest, but then Izuku swings the wrench in an upwards arc, thwarting Bakugo's attack and causing Bakugo to dodge, shooting back. Izuku stands, holding his wrench in his left hand. Of all of the quirks I have analyzed, Bakugo, yours is the one I understand the most. I have seen firsthand what you are capable of. Izuku raised the wrench, pointing it at Bakugo. You can't surprise me anymore, Bakugo. You hear me? Bakugo roared out, releasing an explosion at his feet and kicking up a cloud of smoke. Izuku tries to find Bakugo in the smoke, moving from his position, but Bakugo's hand shoots out from the smog, grabbing Izuku's metal shoulder and detonating. Izuku feels his bones rattle through the metal embedded in his bones, and he cries out in pain. He stumbles out of the cloud of smoke, only for Bakugo to lunge out after him, eyes feral, teeth bared. The explosion connects with Izuku's stomach, causing him to tumble to the ground. Izuku rose to his knees, seeing Bakugo approaching slowly, explosions popping in his palms. Izuku sees the sleeve of his uniform burning away at the arm, and he makes a split-second decision. As Bakugo rushes him, Izuku rips the sleeve from his arm, revealing the metal prosthetic to the world. A chorus of gasps erupt from the arena, and he notices Bakugo seem to grow shocked for only a moment. It was a moment enough. Capitalizing on the small opening, Izuku delivers a punch to Bakugo's chin with the metal arm, causing Bakugo to stumble to the side. Izuku rips the rest of the sleeve, pooling around his metal wrist, standing tall with his bronze facsimile visible to the world at large. Nizu, stop the fight. Now! Yamada brings a hand to Nemuri's shoulder. Nim, please. No! She whips his hand off of her shoulder. I'm not going to stay silent. Not anymore. She turns back to the Chimera, still in his seat. Principal, you should not allow this fight to continue. Other teachers move to calm Nemuri, but Nizu holds a paw up. No, he commands the other teachers. I wish to hear what she says. Some appear hesitant, but relent, allowing Nemuri to speak. It takes her a moment to find her words, but eventually, Nemuri begins to speak, eyes glued to the floor. When Bakugo was beating on that handsome girl, I froze. I should have stopped that match far earlier. It shouldn't have gone so wrong, but I didn't. But I didn't freeze because of the violence. I froze because of the look in Bakugo's eye. Nemuri shuddered. That boy, he was enjoying it. The feeling of beating someone into unconsciousness. The knowledge that he proved he was better than them. He was loving it, and it shocked me. Seeing someone who so boldly declared they want to be a hero seems so disturbed when they are given the chance to cut loose. Still, I kept silent. Nemuri continued. Maybe I had just seen something wrong. But then, he fought Ishido, and I saw it again. When he realized that Ishido was afraid of him, it was like he was relishing in that moment. He looked so vindicated by it, like he had just proven something. Her eyes snapped up, meeting the rodents. Right then and there, I realized there is something deeply wrong with that boy. You didn't hear what I heard. You didn't see what I saw. Nemuri approaches Nizu. When this tournament started, I got this feeling deep down that something bad was going to happen. And over the years, I have learned that these feelings are usually right. So I am asking you again, stop this fight before that happens. There was a long stint of silence among the teachers, most taking in what Nemuri had said. Aizawa seemed pensive, internalizing her words and trying to piece them together with his own interactions with Bakugo. Tashinori seems unconvinced, but otherwise receptive to her words. Maijima stands up, her story igniting his anger once again, but Nizu stops them all. I am not saying I disagree with you, Nemuri, nor am I saying you are wrong. Nizu speaks, but like I said to Kim before, there is nothing that I can do anymore. I cannot stop this fight. Because of the HPSC's interference, even if I wanted to stop it, I no longer have the authority to. Nizu looked down. The HPSC played every card they could and have strong-armed us all. Uday is no longer in control of the sports festival. Nemuri slams her hand into the table. Then take control back. This is your school. Your event. An event which is putting a disabled boy at a lot of risk. Nemuri was raging now, taking it all out on the principal. They're just an agency. They don't run this show. I say take control back and show them what happens if they try to overstep. Ishiyama nods. The HPSC has far overextended themselves, and I believe it is time we take the sports festival back. Several heroes nodded in agreement. Nemuri leading the charge with others stepping into line, but before much could be done, a voice rang out from the entryway. Ah, I see there is a meeting coming to fruition. All eyes turned to see a figure in a pressed, black suit. A young man in glasses, who seems to carry a stern gaze, only matched by an even more cold gait. He marches swiftly to the table and stands at attention next to Nizu. who remain seated, not even meeting their eyes. By all means, the man gestures to the group. Please continue. I believe I heard something about taking the festival back. Many of the previously emboldened teachers sit silent, not confirming the suited man's statement. However, Namiri confronts him directly. That's right, she states firmly. You have far overstepped your boundaries, and everyone knows it. The leather-clad woman crosses her arms. We all know that despite how big you talk, you have no power here. I see. The man takes off his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth from his pocket. Namiri can tell this is all for show. Is that how you all feel? Several teachers nod, while others, mainly Kan and Present Mike, keep their eyes firmly locked on the table, not raising support one way or the other. The black-suited man nods. I see. Thank you for confirming that, Ms. Midnight. The man turns to Namiri. I am deeply sorry for any slight you have perceived against your school. Please understand we merely mean to provide support in operations of the festival, as it became clear to us you sorely needed it. Namiri growled, and several other teachers made to stand, but the suited man put a hand up. Once again, I mean no offense. Actually, I am here to deliver a message to Midnight. An update to her inquiry that I am sure she will find favorable. Namiri raises a brow at the man, who, for the first time in the conversation, seems to grow a small smirk. Allow me to be the bearer of good news. The HPSC looked into your request and took care of that family issue for you. Namiri's blood runs cold. Her pupils narrow and her jaw drops. Her mind permeates with disbelief. But the suited man continues. Let me assure you that she is en route to the finest establishment we could afford at this very moment, escorted by agents who I am sure will do everything in their power to make sure she arrives safely. The suited man sighs, putting on a pantomime of sympathy. But as I am sure you know, there is only so much we can do. Patient transfers can be so very risky. He then gestures to Namiri. Now, you were saying? Something about the sports festival. Namiri feels her heart hammer in her chest, her breathing growing ragged. She tries to find her voice, desperately trying to say something, anything, but his words ring true in her ears. All manner of pleasantries fade from the statement, and what remains is the vile truth lying within the flowery presentation. Slowly, her fists begin to shake. Whether in anger or fear, she isn't sure. What she is sure of is that she slowly, reluctantly, takes her seat. The man in the glasses smirks at the group. Perhaps I was mistaken. He then turns to leave. Well, my job is done. Please continue on. Oh, and let me be the first to assure you that the sports festival is in good hands with our management. With that, he leaves the room, leaving the heroes to stew in their silence. Majima is the first to break that silence. What the hell was that? Nemuri, come on. You're just going to give up? Just like that? Namiri stays silent, looking haunted. Majima turns his attention to the principal. Nizu, please. This is insanity. Are you just going to let the HPSC take over this event? This is your school. You need to step in and stop them. Nizu stands, causing everyone to grow silent. Do you not think I want to? Nizu speaks, the calm in his voice hiding a tempest brewing within. I want nothing more than to take back control, to kick the HPSC out, but I can't. Not without risking the entire school to do it. He turns back to Namiri, who notes his teeth are bared and his fur stands on end. It seems you saw the truth. Namiri, you said before that the HPSC is just an agency? Tell me, do you still believe that? Namiri doesn't respond, much to Nizu's prediction, so he continues, let me assure you, the HPSC tries to play itself as small, another gear in a larger machine. But in that perception, that is where their strength lies. Nizu then turns his gaze. To some, it seems like his eyes are lingering over the arena. But to one man clad in red, he knew those beady eyes were focused directly onto him. The HPSC extends far beyond their agency. They have hands in every walk of life. Izuku stood once again, panting violently, and nursing his bruised ribs. Bakugo, too, was panting, though trying to play up his confidence. However, Izuku saw through the facade, noting the bruising and burns on his chin and how Bakugo winced slightly whenever he breathed in. Still, Bakugo shot forward, rocketing towards Izuku once again. Izuku tried to block his strike, covering his face, but that only led to Izuku being struck in the stomach, causing him to double over. Izuku was then struck in the chin by a knee, causing him to stumble and fall to the ground. If you know so much about my quirk, then you should know that the more I fight, the stronger I get. Bakugo boasted, delivering an explosion to Izuku's stomach. Izuku tumbled over. The quirkless boy tried to rise, only to be kicked in the ribs. You should have known that dragging this out would only make this more painful for you. Another explosion, another stint of Izuku tumbling over. But no, you need to keep popping up, trying to act like you are bigger than you actually are. An explosion to Izuku's shoulder, causing him to fall to the ground. You should have just stayed down. A punch. Given up. A kick. But no. An explosion to Izuku's ribs again. You just can't stop getting in my way, ruining my perfect backstory, just like you always do. Izuku holds up his arms to block the blow, but Bakugo grabs his metal arm, palms heating the bronze flesh, and detonates. A massive explosion rings out, echoing across the arena. The bright phosphorescent light briefly blinds viewers. As the flash fades, the smell of burning metal and slag permeates the air. Izuku lurches back, looking at the twisted and sparking remnants of his arm. The forearm was shattered. Melted slag is all that remains of the wire cage. The central motion pillar is bent and warped, locking the arm in place. The hand is gone, having flown off and the wrist apparatus off to the side, taking the repulsor with it. You can't win, Deku. Nothing you can do can take me down. There was a brief silence, but then, much to Bakugo's and the referee's surprise, they heard a sound erupt from the quirkless boy's mouth. A small bark of laughter, simple and quick. But that small chuckle was followed by another, and then another. Slowly, Izuku began to laugh, truly and fully. Bakugo, the referee, even the world, stared in disbelief as the bruised and battered boy kept laughing. Izuku rose to his feet, his laughter petering out, and he took off his goggles, meeting Bakugo's eyes dead on. Where Bakugo was expecting fear or sorrow, Izuku's eyes were filled with a fire, a determination permeating through his entire being. Honestly, I think I just realized how sad you are. Izuku's gaze never wavered from Bakugo, staring him down as Bakugo stared back. You're fighting a battle, and all you are concerned with is some fictional backstory? That's really all you care about. Izuku chuckled again. Though unlike with Mina, Bakugo could discern no fear. You are just nothing. Your life, your being, you are nothing but your quirk and your pride. And that's pathetic. Here I am, having spent so long preparing for the festival, preparing to face the next generation. And you're still here, playing hero in the park like all those years ago. Izuku slowly moved his left arm up, looking down at the cannon fitted to his arm. I always loved studying quirks. Maybe it's the lack of one that made them so fascinating to me. He moved his hand out, squeezing a hidden valve and causing air to shoot into the cannon, the pressure dial rocketing to maximum. Bakugo rushed Izuku, but Izuku sidestepped, raising his hand to his shoulder and pressing a hidden switch with his left hand, causing the brackets on his right arm to unlatch and letting the arm swing free, obstructing Bakugo's path. I studied the quirks of everyone in the hero course. Their capabilities, their quirks, their weaknesses. Again, Bakugo rushed Izuku, who rolled forward, squeezing another hidden trigger and causing the cannon to ready itself, the hidden paddle trigger rocketing out into position. But for you, I didn't need to. I know firsthand just what you can do, and exactly what I need to do to shut you down. Bakugo roared, shooting himself forward, and Izuku raised the cannon, putting the paddle in line with his chin. Pushing his arm forward, his chin trips the paddle and causes the cannon to fire. The payload shoots out, hitting Bakugo in the chest and shattering, covering Bakugo with an unknown white powder. Bakugo falls to the ground, stumbling, but gets up, caked in the powder, which immediately begins to itch his skin. The substance gets into Bakugo's eye, causing it to start to burn, which causes Bakugo to cry in pain, grabbing his eye to relieve the pain with pressure. Bakugo roars out, trying to launch himself forward again, using his quirk, but instead of shooting forward like he normally does, Bakugo instead falls flat on the ground. Grunting in confusion, Bakugo looks at his hands, seeing this substance covering his palms. Bakugo tries to activate his quirk, feeling the telltale heat of his palms, but no spark follows. No familiar popping of his quirk when he tried to activate it. Bakugo feels a new emotion, a sinking feeling in his chest that leaves him cold. He feels his body unconsciously shiver and turns to look at Izuku. What did you do? What did I do? Izuku parrots. I showed you just how weak you really are. Izuku picked up the ceramic round and loaded it into the cannon, carefully sealing the powder-filled ball into the tube and nodding to himself. Hatsum looked at the cannon, wrapping the final turn of duct tape around it and attaching it to Izuku's left arm. What is in that? Hatsum pondered. Sodium hydroxide, Izuku said curtly, also known as lye. Nitroglycerin is a powerful explosive compound that reacts violently with heat. However, it can be neutralized with caustic soda, leaving it inert to heat. In other words, if his sweat mixes with this powder dash, then the nitroglycerin in his sweat will become unreactive, meaning his quirk doesn't work anymore. Izuku sits stunned for a moment and blushes a bit. Yeah, that. Hatsum nods to herself. That is a good idea. His explosions hurt a lot, and it would be good to stop him from doing that to you. Izuku shakes his head. That's the problem. I can't use this immediately. Hatsum looks at him, confused or somewhat afraid. If I use this too early, then it might not bond properly with his sweat. I need him to be really sweating, which means I will need to wait to use this. But Mei stutters out. But that means that I need to draw out the fight, possibly take some hits as well. Izuku felt his heartbeat increase, as the cold feeling of fear permeated him, but he took a deep breath and focused. But if it works, it will be worth it. Izuku grabs the wrench from the ground and rushes Bakugo, who by instinct tries to dodge using his quirk, only for the sodium hydroxide to quash his attempt. Izuku whirls the wrench in a wide swing, connecting with Bakugo's right arm. Bakugo cried out, stumbling back, only for Izuku to capitalize, swinging his wrench around again and slamming into Bakugo's sternum. This caused Bakugo to fall back, flung to the ground from the blow, breath leaving his lungs. Not so tough without your quirk, are you? Izuku tackled Bakugo, trying to hold him down, but the lack of a right arm led to Bakugo breaking free, flipping them and sending Izuku tumbling. As Izuku rolled, he quickly grabbed a force grenade from his bandolier and grabbed the grenade with the grappling hook. Izuku rose to his feet and rushed over to the side of the arena, trying to get distance, but Bakugo followed, sprinting at him with fists akimbo. This time, Izuku was prepared, pressing down on the switch on the grenade and whirling around, firing the grapple towards Bakugo. Bakugo sidestepped, but Izuku grabbed the carbon fiber cord of the grapple with his teeth, spinning the cord around like a whip. The path of the cord was interrupted, angling wildly towards Bakugo's body, just in time for the grenade to detonate directly into the base of Bakugo's spine, sending him hurtling forward, straight into Izuku, wrench bared. Izuku sent the wrench into an uppercut, connecting directly with Bakugo's chin, and causing the bow's bottom jaw to crash into the upper jaw, briefly concussing the explosive boy. Bakugo felt stars dancing in his eyes from the blow. His brain felt like it was rattling around in his skull. But Izuku did not relent, slamming the wrench into Bakugo's stomach and sending Bakugo to the ground, tumbling violently. Bakugo made to stand, groaning in pain and confusion. What's happening? Another blow, this time between his shoulder blades. Why am I not winning? A punch to his shoulder sends him falling to the ground. I'm the best. I'm not supposed to lose. In desperation, he reached out for his quirk, but similar to before, the powder prevented his sweat from igniting. Izuku then sent a steel-toed boot into Bakugo's side, sending him sprawling to the floor. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. I'm meant to be the winner. I am meant to be the undisputed champion. So how is quirkless shitty Deku putting up a fight? Bakugo, beaten and bruised, roared as he lunged for Izuku's legs, grabbing his ankle and sending them both tumbling to the ground. He pinned Izuku, delivering punch after punch to his face, but the potency of his blows is far and away from before. Bakugo is so used to attacking with his quirk that his attacks lack potency without it, something that Izuku is able to compare personally. Izuku slams his left hand into Bakugo's stomach and flips them, punching Bakugo in the nose over and over again. Bakugo and Midoriya traded blows like this, one flipping the pile, getting in a few good hits before being flipped and taking the same hits all over again. This eventually culminated with Izuku kicking Bakugo off of him, sending the blonde tumbling. Bakugo rises to his feet again, trying desperately to think up a solution, only to be left with nothing. Every idea that ran through his head involved his quirk, and thanks to this damn powder, his quirk wasn't fucking working. Izuku rises to his feet too. Both boys were bruised, bloodied, and panting with exhaustion. But unlike Izuku, Bakugo seemed a stranger to this feeling, something Izuku noticed. What? Can't take a hit. Izuku pants out, grabbing the wrench from the ground. After all that boasting about how great you are, you can't take a punch? Shut the fuck up. Bakugo shouted, lunging towards Izuku, who sidestepped. This is all your fault. Again, he lunges for Izuku, but Izuku ducks out of the way. If you had just stayed in your fucking place, then none of this would be happening. This time, Bakugo's fist connects with Izuku's side, though only grazing him. Why won't you just get out of my story already? Izuku dodges again, elbowing Bakugo in the back as his blow carries wide. Bakugo falls to the ground, and Izuku stares down at him. Why? After everything you did to me, after everything you put me through, you still ask me why? Izuku kicked Bakugo, causing the boy to tumble. I'm proving something right now in front of everyone, that I am just as good as you, that I am better than you, even without a quirk. Izuku lets out a bitter chuckle. I mean, look at yourself. You're lying on the ground, impotent and aimless, unable to even really fight. And everyone is seeing this. Bakugo froze, looking up at the crowd. He sees cameras pointed at the arena, broadcasting the whole fight. He sees the audience looking at the fight in boredom. Many seem uninterested, others outright apathetic. But the worst part is the ones in the crowd whispering to each other. He can't hear their whispers, but his mind fills the gaps, permeating his head with toxic words. This is the best of the hero course? He can't even beat a quirkless kid. The best? More like average at best. This guy is pathetic. Like he could ever be the #1 hero. More and more poisonous words fill his mind, permeating through his skull, bouncing around like church bells between his eyes. The vile machinations of his own imagination thrum his head, pounding like drums and disorienting him. More and more these thoughts attacked his soul, the image he had built up in his mind of himself, shattering in real time. Bakugo felt that sinking feeling again, this time causing his entire body to grow numb. He felt his breath shorten as the world collapsed in on him. And then he finally realized what this feeling was, that cold, dark feeling that had such a stranglehold on his soul. It was fear. Bakugo lunged for Izuku again, tackling the quirkless boy, trying to quash this feeling. But instead of the warmth of pride, the cold fear remained. He struck Izuku in the face, which he thought would help, but the feeling only seemed to grow as Izuku shrugged off the punch, just like before. The quirkless boy was bruised and battered. His lip was bloated with swelling, but that fire in the green eyes still persisted, showing Bakugo that this fight was not over yet. You're nothing, Bakugo shouts at Izuku. You are worthless. You always have been. Why can't you just stay in your place? Izuku, bruised and battered, looked up at Bakugo, causing him to freeze up again. That fucking freak was still smiling. Are you sure you were still talking about me, Bakugo? Bakugo didn't have time to respond, as Izuku unleashed his wrench into Bakugo's ribs once again. Bakugo felt a sharp crack and fell to the side, letting Izuku rise to his hands and knees. Bakugo tried to shout, but began to cough as something sharp dug into his side. He felt for something sharp, But feeling his side simply showed him that nothing had changed. His skin had not been punctured. My rib, it's digging into my lung. That fucking defect broke my rib. All that talk, Bako, Izuku panted out. And it looks like I finally found a way to shut you up. Shut. Another cough, but Bakugo simply shakes his head, ignoring the pain. Shut up. I'm the best. God damn it. The best. I am destined to be number one. Everybody always said it. The only loser who never seemed to get the memo was you. Bakugo faced Izuku frantically. I'm amazing. I have always been amazing. Bakugo rushed Izuku. I am going to be the number one hero. No matter who I need to crush to get there. Bakugo's fist connected with Izuku's stomach, but unlike before, he felt the heat fill his palm, followed by a small explosion, sending Izuku stumbling back. Bakugo looked down at his hands, seeing that most of the white powder had rubbed off of his palms, and that his sweat was starting to cover his palms again. Immediately, he felt that cold feeling leave him, the warmth of pride swelling within him again. He turned towards Deku, who seemed shocked, and hidden deep within his eyes afraid. At that, Bakugo felt his pride only grow. Bakugo put his hand behind him, heat rising across his palms as he rocketed forward using his quirk, catching Izuku in the chest, causing Izuku to stumble back. He grabbed the quirkless boy's jacket and used it to pull Izuku closer and detonated across the boy's chest. Izuku cried out in pain, falling to the ground and coughing loudly. Bakugo, however, ran forward and kicked Izuku in the stomach, causing him to spit up bile. Again and again, Bakugo struck Izuku with another explosive blow, all while the sadistic smile on his face grew and grew, seeing his old punching bag back in his place. Eventually, he picked Izuku up and connected his fist into Izuku's sternum, feeling the hard bone crackle against his fist, and rocking Izuku back with an explosive blow. Izuku tumbled again and again, pooling into a heap on the side of the arena. Bakugo started to laugh, a vicious, stunted series of barks that simply bled contempt. He slowly marched towards the heap that was Izuku, but was stunned when he saw the heap start to move. Izuku slowly lifted his upper body, still kneeling on the ground, beaten, bruised, with one eye swollen suit, and lip ejecting blood. Bakugo was in disbelief. How the hell are you still conscious? Bakugo shouted at the quirkless boy. Why won't you just stay down? You're done, Deku. You can't win. Izuku, still kneeling, wheezing and gasping for air, begins to laugh again, much to Bakugo's ire. Izuku coughed, but continued. You think that after everything you did to me, that this would be enough to keep me down? Izuku let out another harsh, pained chuckle. You think after everything that you and everyone else put me through, that you could still hurt me like you did before? Izuku rose to his feet, slowly and with great effort. You think that after living through the worst pain, all my life, you could stop me now? Izuku finally stood tall, staring Bakugo down, and lifted his one remaining hand, pointing a finger at Bakugo. You can't hurt me anymore, Bakugo. Not like you used to, Izuku declared, leaving Bakugo in disbelief. I have a goal, something I need to prove, and I am not going to let you stop me now. Not anymore. I still have to show the world that I am not done. Bakugo roared out in pure rage, rocketing towards Izuku to deliver the final blow. Izuku reaches down, quickly grabbing the remnants of his old, ruined arm, and swings with all his might, connecting with Bakugo's head, causing the explosive blonde to fall to the side, hitting the ground hard. Bakugo rose to his hands and knees again, slower than usual. He feels liquid seep down his skull, dripping onto the ground. He reaches up, his fingers coming away with blood, feeling the deep gash along his temple, seeping like a canyon across his forehead. The explosive blonde rose again, staring at Izuku, who looked ready to pass out, and he laughed to himself. All that talk, and yet you can barely stand. Bakugo turned to face Izuku, who was panting hard. You can't win. You can barely keep yourself upright. Maybe you're right. Maybe I can't win, Izuku admitted, much to Bakugo's delight. Maybe at the end of all of this, I can't beat you. But to the world, I made sure that you wouldn't win either. Bakugo froze, his expression turning from sadistic glee to resolute anger. He lunges again, grabbing Izuku and throwing him to the ground. Izuku falls down, crying in pain. Bakugo pins Izuku once again, holding his palms up to the air. You think that after everything you did to me, that this would be enough to keep me down? You know, Deku, maybe I was wrong before. Maybe I assumed that after taking your arm, you would have learned your fucking place. Bakugo's grin grew manic, almost feral with its bloodlust. But it seems I wasn't clear enough the first time. You talk about taking away my win, but you seem to have forgotten. Bakugo raises his hand to Izuku's face, pressing his palm to the right side of Izuku's skull. Izuku begins to panic, struggling against Bakugo's grip, but Bakugo knows to pin Izuku's other arm with his hand, keeping him trapped beneath him. I always win. Izuku has barely a moment to fight back, to do anything to get himself out of this. But in the end, just like a year ago, he can't. Bakugo's palm hummed, then seared, and finally, he detonated, releasing an explosion that rocked the arena, sending Izuku sprawling back, falling to the floor of the arena, and screaming in pain, the harsh, shrill cry of agony piercing the heavens, just like the events of 1 year ago. Bakugo rushed towards Izuku while he was down, kicking the prone, quirkless boy several times in the ribs, but Izuku's cries never stopped, his hands gripping his face. Bakugo went to deliver another blow, but he felt his hands get restrained by something flexible and strong. This same material wrapped around his legs, sending him falling to the ground, hog-tied and impotent. What the dash, he turns to look over, seeing his homeroom teacher restraining him, eyes glowing a sharp red. Stand down, now! Namuri and Majima rushed over to the side of the arena, seeing Izuku continue to scream and flail. Midoriya, calm down, you're going to be a dash. Majima's sentence was cut short as he lifted Izuku's hand from his face, and he gasped in horror, nearly throwing up. Along the right side of Izuku's face, a large burn ran from ear to nose. His skin was scorched and torn, the entire wound bleeding profusely. The flesh of Izuku's ear had been charred and disfigured, creating this almost ghoulish protrusion from the side of his face. His mouth dribbled blood, one of his teeth was missing, and the lip had been split clean from bevel to the skin of his chin, and his mouth only released soft wails of agony, accompanied by bubbles of sobs. His skin simmered with still raw heat, flesh once untouched by the sun, revealed anew to its rays, and crying out with all it could to escape the fiery glow, but nothing compared to the state of his right eye. Izuku's right eye socket was forced open, the eyelid having completely burned away. The skin around the socket was stretched and crimson, the epicenter of the blast, flowering out around the socket like a rose in bloom. Inside the socket, a slightly translucent material dripped from it, dribbling out from the wound, as his optic nerve had begun to simply dangle out of the socket, attached still to the remnants of what once was his right eye. Oh my God! Namuri shouted, gasping in horror, and trying to cover the wound. Cut the feed, the referee shouts. Cut the damn feed dash. The screen turns black, the video playing seemingly having died right in front of the audience's eyes. Hannah stared up at the blank screen. The visual of the last frame burned into her mind. Well, what just happened? All right. Hisashi spoke, straining to lift his bag out of the back of their car. I think this is it. The heat of the August sun beat down on him as he finally got the lip of the bag free and set it on the ground with a huff. He wiped the sweat from his brow, the dark strands of messy raven hair sticking to his forehead. Turning his head, Hisashi squinted his eyes as the harsh rays reflected off the metallic pane of the airport gate, scanning with his diminished vision to find his terminal. From the corner of his eye, he saw Inko step out of the car, briefly taking some time to reassure their son, who was sitting in a booster seat in the back. Izuku seemed depressed, looking down at the floor of the car with watery eyes, a sight that broke Hisashi's heart. If the conversation he and his son had had the previous night, Izuku needed encouragement right now. But more importantly, Hisashi needed to get Izuku out of that school, something he, unfortunately, did not have time to do now. Inko approached her husband, noting his contemplative expression with concern. You're worried about him, aren't you?" Inko said. Hisashi groaned in frustration, but did not offer any further verbal answer, merely nodding. His wife placed her hand on his shoulder and gave him a tight-lipped smile. "Hisashi, I'm sure that Izuku's quirk is just a bit late is all. It's rare for 2 years to go by without a quirk awakening, but it isn't impossible." Hisashi looks at Inko with surprise. "Wadash, no, that's not what I am worried about." Hisashi argues firmly, "I do not care what quirk, if any, Izuku gets. No, I'm thinking about his school." Inko looks at Hisashi in confusion. "Why? Is there something wrong?" Hisashi runs his hand through his hair. "I'm not sure yet. Something that Izuku told me just feels off." He sighs. "I'll take care of it when I get back. While I'm at Island, I'll research alternative school systems in the area and try to figure something out whenever I get a chance." Hisashi feels a buzzing in his pocket and reaches in to grab his phone, noticing the alarm he set for himself. "Crap, I don't have much time before I have to be in the air." He sighs and smiles tiredly at his wife, who seems to be looking down, saddened by this revelation. Hisashi reaches over to grab Inko's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "I'm sorry, Inko," Hisashi says, a twinge of guilt in his voice. "But look on the bright side. This is a huge step for my career. Detnerat is trusting me to represent the company at the upcoming tech summit. This could be huge." Plus, his excitement cools, and Inko sees hope in his eyes. "Plus, if I do well, maybe I can finally advance to a supervisor role. If I do that, then maybe I won't have to go on so many trips. I can finally start being the husband you deserve." His eyes unfocus from Inko, sharpening on the figure of his son, still in the seat of the car. "And I can be the father he deserves too." Inko follows his gaze and relaxes, trying to put on a happy facade for her husband. "You had better go. You're going to miss your flight." Hisashi laughs. I will. He moves to grab his bags, but stops. "But first, I have to do something." Hisashi leaves his bags, walking over to the side of the car, where Izuku was seated, looking forlornly down at his all-might action figure. Hisashi opened the car door, catching Izuku's attention, his green eyes looking up to meet his father's visage. "Hey, bud." Hisashi smiles down at his son, but Izuku cannot meet him with another smile. Hisashi leans into the car. "It's okay. I'll be back in a week." Izuku turns his gaze from his father. "But then you'll just have to leave again." Hisashi feels his heart shatter at that, and he leans further into the car. "I'm sorry, Izuku, it isn't fair. It isn't fair at all." Hisashi sighs. "But hey, try to think about when I get back. You'll get to tell me all of those new things you have built. Plus, I can show you all the cool heroes and gadgets I saw while there." Izuku seems to brighten a bit at this, but the light quickly fades, and he and his father are left in silence for some time. Hisashi sighs again and makes to leave the car, but Izuku calls out to him one last time. "Dad, what if I never get my quirk?" Hisashi stops and turns back around, seeing Izuku staring intensely at his all-might action figure. "I'm scared. I don't want to be quirkless. Everyone at school keeps saying that quirkless people are weak and useless. I don't want to be useless." Hisashi stayed silent for some time, and Izuku thought he may have left, but was startled when a familiar warm hand rested on his shoulder. He looked up to see his father staring down at him, his face set in stone, and his gaze intense. "Izuku," his father begins, "when I was young, my father always talked about how great of heroes his children were destined to become." Izuku focused on his father intensely. His father had never brought up his grandfather before. Grandpa was always obsessed with this idea of heroes, and that there were people who were born to be heroes, and people who didn't matter. Hisashi sighed, looking up to the sky. "I had 3 siblings, 2 older brothers and a younger sister. All of them had powerful quirks, more powerful than me. They were all obsessed with becoming heroes, doing everything they could to be the next best thing. Meanwhile, I was more interested in machines and mathematics. Grandpa hated that, and he tried to quash my interests, telling me to focus on becoming a hero instead, but I never listened. Eventually, he gave up on me, and my siblings followed suit. To them, I was a pariah, the failed child. Growing up like that, I grew to resent his ideas. I hated that I had to be a hero, or I didn't mean anything to him." Hisashi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For a while, I even resented heroes too. Izuku gasped, but Hisashi continued. Eventually, I left that house and abandoned my family. I couldn't bear it any longer. I even changed my last name. Hisashi looked like he had aged significantly since the conversation started, but he pressed on. Eventually, life moved on, and I haven't spoken to any of them since, though. My siblings ended up all becoming heroes, great in their own rights. I suppose at the end, they forgot about me. Izuku looked confused and sad, but Hisashi seemed to refocus on the moment, meeting his son's gaze again. But he began, growing up like that taught me a lesson, one that I have carried into everything that I do. Hisashi lowered his gaze again, meeting his son's eyes once again. I learned that not all men are created equal, that there will always be those who are born stronger than others, or in a better place than others. At the end of the day, where you start is up to nothing but chance. Hisashi smiled at his son, a bright, beaming smile that seemed to dwarf the light of the August sun. But who said we had to stay that way? Hisashi questioned. Who says we have to let our beginnings define our end? I always found it much more satisfying when instead of being who you were born to be, you become who you choose to be. So, what does it matter if you are quirkless? Hisashi puts a hand on Izuku's hair. So what if you weren't born with power? What matters in the end is what you decide to be next. Hisashi stands up from the car, leaning out of it. Izuku seems to lean towards him, but is halted by the seatbelt. Personally, bud? Hisashi smiled down at him. I can't wait to see who you become. Hisashi walked away from the car, grabbing his bag and hurrying up the stairs of the airport. He called back to Inko, shouting, "Take care, both of you. I'll see you both when I get back." Hisashi walked through the doors of the airport, Izuku watching the whole time as his form disappeared behind the frosted glass. Little did he know, that would be the last time he would see his father smile. There was a long silence on the street corner as some people began to panic, confusion beginning to stir within the group. Many were muttering to themselves or their friends, trying to understand if what they had seen on that screen had been reality. The image of the boy's scorched face burned into their retinas. Hana Satu was motionless, trying to process what she had seen, desperately hoping that it was some sort of trick. But the more she thought about it, the less she felt like her eyes could have simply lied to her. She knew what she had seen. She hated what she had seen. All right, vacate the area. Hana was broken from her musings by several sharply dressed sidekicks directing people away from the square, trying to disperse the crowd. Hana felt a hand lay on her shoulder and looked up to see an armored man staring down at her. She knew that figure well and had seen him race several times before. Ingenium, she begins, W dashed. Sorry, he interrupts, but we need everyone to disperse. It is best if people simply leave and go about their business. But what about that boy? Hana tries to argue. What is going to happen to him? Ingenium keeps directing her away from the square. I'm sorry, kid, but we need people to leave the road. I'm sure you were shocked by what you saw, but let me assure you, the heroes at UA can handle it. Right now, we need to prevent anyone from acting rash in a crowd like this. As Ingenium escorts Hana and several others to the sidewalk and away from the Jumbotron, neither noticed the figure perched on the lip of the roof above them, staring down in contempt. And just like that, it's like it never even happened. Stain's eyes shoot up to the screen, then back down again as the crowd disperses. It's easier for people to ignore the problems of society, to look away from the stains on the sheets. Disgusting. These fakes, every day they sink their roots more and more into this country. Today, they brush off a mutilation. Tomorrow, I'm running out of time. My message needs to be heard. Ingenium speeds off, down the street, but Stain's gaze never leaves him. And I know where I should start. There was no medal ceremony for the sports festival this year. There was no event for the second or third years as well. After the events of the finale, you had shut down the entire sports festival and had the stadium vacated after the fact. Many of the teachers had been tasked with facilitating this process, namely Eraserhead and Ectoplasm, leaving several other teachers scrambling to quell the situation that had evolved since that final blow. One teacher in particular found himself sitting in front of Recovery Girl's office. Maijima's hands were supporting his head, iron fingertips splayed out. His knee was bouncing, and his gaze was fixed firmly in front of him, at the closed door of the nurse's office. Even though he seemed focused, his mind was anything but. Every time he tried to take his mind off the events not 6 hours prior, he found that his thoughts kept shooting back to the smell of burning flesh, the freshly scorched skin, and the, "Don't think about it," Maijima reprimanded himself. "He'll be fine. Recovery girl can heal anything." He knew deep down that that was far from the truth. Next to him, Midnight sat, shaking. Having helped Maijima carry Midoriya to Recovery Girl, with the aid of 2 robots, Midnight had decided to stay, waiting for when Recovery Girl was done. Maijima looked over, seeing Midnight trembling with concern and fear. The two sat in silence, listening to the buzzing of fluorescent lights, neither willing to voice their fears. From the mouth of the hall, they saw that the stadium had been completely cleared. Maijima moved to break the silence, grasping at his mind to find something to make this experience even a bit less grim. But Midnight beat him to the punch. "This is all my fault." Maijima looked at her in surprise, but stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. I failed as a hero, and as a teacher. I failed to protect my students." "That isn't true, Maijima tried to respond, but Midnight interrupted him. "Yes, it is true." Midnight shook her head. "Maybe for a civilian, this would be acceptable. But I'm a veteran hero. If I had just done my job, if I had just..." She trails off, her words unable to articulate in her emotion. Maijima stayed silent. He wanted to argue with her, but he couldn't deny he had been thinking similar to her during that mess. He looked at Namuri and noticed that her eyes were ragged. This had clearly been weighing on her for some time. Sometimes people need to get it out. Maybe I'll let her talk. As predicted, Midnight continued. "It was my responsibility to judge when things went too far, when violence becomes too much violence. Injuries were expected. But this..." She chuckled bitterly. "I had every chance to do something, and I just stood there." Midnight's voice settled back to a reasonable volume, and she slumped forward, staring at the door. "Maybe if I had disqualified Bakugo before, this wouldn't have happened." "Maybe you're right," Maijima spoke, causing Midnight to let out a bitter bark of a laugh. "Then again, maybe you're wrong. At this point, we can't change what happened. What we can do is be there for Izuku and make sure that this doesn't go unpunished." Midnight sighed. "You heard the commission. That ship has sailed." Maijima's jaw clenched, recalling the conversation that many of the teachers had mere hours prior. Maijima stormed into the teacher's booth, where many of his colleagues were gathered, seeing that many were discussing something heatedly around the central table. Despite an abundance of seats, none were sitting down. The iron-clawed hero slammed his hand into the table, catching everybody's attention. He looked around the table, seeing Aizawa staring at him with a facade of indifference. But having worked with the man for years, he noted the hint of guilt buried in his eyes. Ishiyama could not meet his glare, choosing to look down at the table. Yamada and Namuri were next to each other, Namuri with a heated gaze, and Yamada with concern. The only one who did not react much was Nizu, who stood on the table, gaze locked at a picture pinned to the table. A picture of Katsuki Bakugo. Maijima grabbed the picture and held it up. "I want this fucking monster expelled. Now!" Nobody seemed to offer an argument initially, but after hesitating, Ishiyama spoke. To play devil's advocate, Ishiyama started, noting the glares that met him after that statement. "We do not know the circumstances that led to Midoriya's injuries. Perhaps things are not as they seem." Maijima almost lunged over the table at his cement-headed colleague, but Midnight acted first, shouting at the man. "You have got to be kidding me," she shouted, causing Ishiyama to flinch. "We all saw him hold Midoriya down. We all saw him grab him." "I am not defending Bakugo's actions," Ishiyama placated. "I am simply suggesting that we not be rash, and let ourselves calm down and think rationally." Rationality flew out the window when this little shit mutilated another student in a school-sanctioned event. Maijima roared, slamming Bakugo's picture into the table. "Where the hell is he anyways?" "He is detained," Aizawa said, "under guard, in a place that I will not be telling you where." Maijima grit his teeth, but the message was clear. They were worried Majima might hurt the boy. A fair worry, Majima admitted to himself. I reiterate, Majima said again. I want him expelled. No hesitation. This piece of shit needs to go. Many of the teachers did not speak one way or the other. Even Ishiyama at this had remained silent. But then, a hand rose, and Yamada Hizashi stood. I agree with Majima, President Mike said, uncharacteristically serious this time. Bakugo has shown a pattern of behavior that is frankly disturbing. He clearly doesn't care about who or what he has to hurt to win. That isn't how a hero should behave. With Yamada's declaration, several other teachers nodded along with him, including Snipe, Midnight, and, surprisingly, Aizawa. Everyone looked to Nizu to answer them, but he seemed to be focusing on the screen in the middle of the room, displaying a censored frame from the live broadcast of the sports festival, a newscaster speaking next to it. The media has picked up the story, Nizu says. It will not be long before battle lines are drawn. He looks down at the paper. I think we should make our stance clear. This type of behavior will not be tolerated. Bakugo Katsuki will be expelled. You will do no such thing. The room turns to a voice as several men and women in suits enter the room, followed by an aging woman in a professional suit. Her hair was tied into a tight bun, and her eyes were a frigid blue steel. Her face was set into a perpetual scowl. Madam President, Nizu says with a strained smile. To what do we owe the pleasure? The rest of the staff did not react so kindly, instead seeming to glare back at the woman. If she was bothered, she did not show it, choosing to meet Nizu's gaze, and his alone. I had a feeling once that incident happened, you may react rashly. I am telling you that expelling Katsuki Bakugo at this point is a foolish mistake. Mistake? Majima shouts, despite the president not wavering from Nizu's gaze. Katsuki Bakugo almost killed another student on stage, and you are calling that a mistake? That is a serious accusation. Power loader. Do you have evidence to prove that he acted maliciously? Majima made a rebuttal, but found that a small white paw had been outstretched in front of him. While I respect your stance, Madam President, Nizu begins, you are not responsible for the individual decisions of our school. If we choose to expel a student, we do not need your support or approval to do so. Madam President seems unfazed and riposts with, the Hero Commission has taken interest in Katsuki Bakugo's future, and we believe that if properly nurtured and educated, he can become a great hero. She stiffened her posture. Therefore, I am ordering you to keep Bakugo enrolled in this school. Ordering? Nizu's smile begins to widen, showing his sharp fangs to the president, who remains unfazed. If I recall, Madam President, UA is a privately owned academy, and therefore we actually do not need to abide by your orders. Privately owned, but publicly endorsed by the Hero Commission. The president rebuts. Do not forget, Nizu, that the Hero Commission offers significant contribution to the continued operation of this school, and not just financially. The president takes several steps forward. Let me be abundantly clear with all of you. Bakugo is not to be expelled for this incident. We should all be allowed to learn from our mistakes. As she utters that last word, she turns to meet Majima's gaze, causing fury to build in his stomach. But before he could reply, he heard Nizu speak. As you command, Madam President, we will not expel Katsuki Bakugo for his actions in the sports festival. Several heads turn to Nizu in shock and disbelief, but Nizu does not meet their gazes, staring ahead to meet the president as she nods in confirmation. However, we at U.A retain the right to punish Bakugo in other ways. He must face consequences for his actions, else he may never have the opportunity to learn from his mistakes, as you so eloquently put it. There is a moment of tension between the two, until the president nods. Good. I am glad you understand your position, Principal Nizu. With that, she turns and walks out of the room, the other suited figures following her out the door. Trust me, Madam President. Nizu is no longer smiling, his teeth bared, ready to rip his target to shreds. I understand my position perfectly. After the commission leaves, Majima storms over to Nizu, slamming his hand into the table in front of him. The iron tips of his excavator claws dig into the fine wood, causing it to splinter. Are you fucking kidding me? Majima roars. All that talk, and you cave like a coward the first bit of pressure gets put onto you. That's really all it takes? Niza doesn't respond, so Majima leans closer. You are weak. You're really going to let that psycho get away with mutilating a student. It has been 3 hours, and Recovery Girl still isn't done healing Izuku's injuries. Who the fuck knows if he's going to be okay after this? And you want to let Bakugo off with nothing but a slap on the wrist? Majima. All Might interjects, approaching the hunched man. I understand you are upset, but please try and calm down. Majima whirls onto All Might, who takes a step back at the fury in his eyes. Oh, of course you would say that. Gotta make sure you don't bite the hand that feeds. Huh. What else would I expect from the Commission's biggest show pony? Majima saw hurt in All Might's eyes, but he didn't care. He opened his mouth, ready to continue shouting, but Nizu interrupted him. I understand your concern, Majima, but you mistake my actions as relenting. Namiri approached Nizu. Usually, I am able to trust you, Nizu, but here, I am not sure I can in this situation. I just don't understand your game. Namiri's tone was calm, but Majima could see the barely restrained anger hidden deeply. She was doing everything in her power to avoid lashing out. Let me be clear with you all right now. Nizu spoke. As Napoleon Bonaparte once said, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Right now, an opportunity has opened up. The Hero Commission laid all their cards on the table, and they misplayed their hand. I need you to trust me, at least for a bit longer, and unfortunately, it involves indulging Madam President. But let me be clear, this will be the last time she tries to control my school. Some of the other teachers seem to relent, but Majima does not seem to calm. Instead, he seems to blister even more. Here you go with your fucking games. I'm sick of it. You play around with people like they are chess pieces, always going on and on about patience and the bigger picture, but you are missing the reality right now. A student was mutilated. MY student. And the one who did it is getting let go, with not even a mark against him. Majima's fists were clenched, but they began to relax. I'm done. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice. I'm not going to sit by and pretend that I think this is okay, that playing with people's lives is okay. Majima turned, and he heard several people call out to him, telling him this is foolish, but he doesn't listen, simply walking to leave the room and head to the nurse's office. He needed to be there if, when Midoriya woke up, Majima's fist was clenched as he recalled that meeting, gritting his teeth in frustration. He did not regret his decision back then, and he sure didn't now. He wasn't about to roll over and pretend like he was fine with this, not when one of his students was the one suffering for it. I still cannot believe that Nizu just gave up like that. Majima seethed. He pretends like he has a plan, like this is all going according to his whim, but I don't see it. Majima stands up. And even if I did, why does Midoriya have to suffer for it to work? Namiri was still looking down, her gaze affixed onto the tile floor. It was clear she was battling with the same thoughts. Majima continued. Maybe if he would just explain himself for once, instead of using everyone, I would trust this, but I can't. I won't. Geez, you sure are loud, boy. Majima and Namiri's eyes snapped up, seeing Recovery Girl walk out of the nurse's office. She seemed exhausted, like her age was finally catching up with her. But in her eyes, Majima saw a deep sadness. He walked over to Recovery Girl, gingerly, fearing the worst. How? Majima can't find the words, scared to ask the question, and cement the answer into reality. Recovery Girl met him with a complicated gaze but sighed. You can relax a bit, Midoriya isn't dead. Majima breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. But he still felt that same pit of sadness, knowing that that was likely the best news he would get. I did everything I could. It was touch and go for a bit. The boy is exhausted, but will hopefully wake up tomorrow. Recovery Girl looked down, a deep grief on her face. I have seen so many young heroes suffer horrifying injuries, too many young people having their lives ruined before they really begin. But this boy isn't a hero. He shouldn't have been put through this. Recovery Girl opens the door, allowing both Namiri and Majima to enter the medical wing. The lights were blinding, But Majima zeroed in on the lone figure in the far corner, still asleep on his cot. He quickly walked over there, assessing the boy as he lay. Like I said, I did everything I could, Recovery Girl lamented. There is only so much my quirk can do. Recovery Girl sighed out, age showing clear on her face. My quirk speeds up the natural healing of the body. I can heal fresh wounds like burns, but I cannot heal what the body can't or what is no longer there to heal. Izuku's form seemed fragile and thin. His breathing was ragged, but steady, hooked up to a nutrient fort and a breathing mask. His uncovered eye was closed, relaxed but strained. His body still had several bruises littered across his skin. On the other side of Izuku's face, a thick swath of bandages covered his right eye and upper skull. I will say, this boy is tough, tougher than most. But my quirk has limits. I was able to heal most of the burns on the right side of the face. His ear is restored, though he will likely suffer bouts of chronic tinnitus. He can at least hear out of it. I was not able to heal the more severe burns all the way, so his eye socket will have scarring, and she pauses, and I could not save his eye. Majima's breath hitched, and he felt the weight of her words crash down on him. Namiri looked close to tears, so Majima laid a supportive hand on her shoulder, trying to stabilize her. What can we do now? Majima turned to look down at Recovery Girl. Frankly, nothing. Recovery Girl's blunt delivery washed over Majima. I will stay overnight and watch Midoriya. You two need to go home, get some rest, and try to be there for him when he wakes up. This won't be an easy recovery process. The two heroes nod and make to walk out the door, but Majima stops, taking a look back at his sleeping student. He keeps his gaze there for some time, before turning back around and leaving the room. Majima and Namiri walk in silence towards the gate of the stadium. The sun was beginning to set, bathing the world in bright orange and pink hues. Throughout the walk, Namiri was throwing glances onto Majima, concern blatant on her face. Do you want to talk about it? She suggested, but was met with some more silence. Eventually, they reached the entrance of the school, the sun dipping low, the sky darkening. Namiri made to walk away, but was stopped when Majima spoke for the first time since the nurse's office. 15. Namiri looked back at him in confusion, but Majima wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the ground, grief etched onto his face. He's only 15. Majima clarifies. Only 15, and he's faced worse than most people can imagine. Majima chuckles bitterly. I have seen veteran heroes break from losing a limb, the pain, the recovery, the shame they feel at being incomplete. Majima swallows harshly, stalling himself. And he's just a kid, not even old enough to drive, and he's a double amputee. A cold breeze blows between the two of them, and Namiri closes the gap between them, reaching out and pulling Majima into an embrace. Majima, shocked, does not make a move, just letting her hug him. It's like you said, we can't change what happened, but we can be there for him when he wakes up. Majima feels her words wash over him, and he nods. Namiri releases him, and the two greet each other farewell. The walk to the parking lot is short, but his mind racing as it is makes him feel like it takes an eternity before he spots the familiar metal visage of his car. Majima reaches his car, starting the engine, listening to the vehicle roar to life. He doesn't shift the car, leaving it in park for some time, pondering the events of the day. We can't change what happened, but we can be there for him when he wakes up. I'm not going to abandon you, Izuku, Majima declares in his head. I'm not going to let you suffer alone. Interesting. A figure sits in his office, watching a replay of the final fight of the sports festival, sipping on a crystal glass filled with fine brandy. Despite his lax posture, it is clear to everyone who knows the man that he is anything but relaxed. Again, he replays the television, the screen stopping on the visage of a blonde teenager, a malicious grin on his face as he unleashes an explosion upon the quirkless boy. Powerful quirk, he presses a button, and it moves to a clip of Bakugo using his quirk to rocket ahead, moving into a flip over his opponent, not to mention incredible skill and a ferocity to match. Another button, this time with Bakugo, fighting Mina Ishido. Bakugo bulldozes Mina, knocking her down and unleashing an explosion at close range, disorienting her. He has an excellent grasp of his abilities and knows how to use them to win. It is clear we should keep an eye on this Katsuki Bakugo. He may be useful in the future. A large oak door opens, cracking light into the room. He sees a figure enter the room. A disheveled man with unruly black hair and blue-tinted sunglasses enters the room. He wears a long black trench coat that goes down to his shins and thick black boots on his feet. "Apologies, sir," the man speaks, an easy smile finding its way onto his face. "But I think you would be happy to learn that we have gained a new ally to the cause." "Oh," the sitting man rumbled, his brown hair only partially revealed by the crack of light entering the room. "And who might that be?" "Another member of the National Diet, sir," the black-haired man responds. It took some convincing, as well as extended periods of discussion, but he has finally seen the light. However, it is almost time for the banquet. "You have a speech, remember?" "Ah," the man finally stands, towering over his chair. "Thank you, Trumpet. I had nearly forgotten. I found myself quite thoroughly entertained by the sports festival this year, and nearly lost track of time." "I understand, sir. But remember, you need to be punctual. The people must see their leader as an example, and that starts with Dash." "You needn't lecture me, Trumpet." The man smiles easily, but Trumpet notes the twinge of anger in his voice and stops himself. "Of course, my liege. Forgive me." Trumpet bows deeply before raising himself. "Are you ready, Redestro?" "Yes," Redestro replies. "I am always ready." Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Genius Deku challenged the world without a quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to JayDeeKay for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section. See you soon in the next video.